In this episode, we're talking to Rick Mulready about how to grow a business, pivot in a business, and how to email the top people in your industry to go get coffee. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. All right, welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I think I still am the most visited guest on your podcast, right?
You are still. You
Nice.
still hold that. Did you get your plaque?
Not yet. Is it coming?
Well, yeah. Due to slower mail right now, it's on its way.
Dang it, coronavirus.
I think it's
Ruined my life.
I think it's 5 times on the
Yeah.
podcast.
Amazing. And I'm happy to come back for a 6th anytime you want. But with that being said, I thought it would only be right to have you on as our very first guest on the podcast.
What? I didn't know that. I'm the first guest.
Yep. First
Holy
one.
cow! I'm super honored. Seriously, I'm honored.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, of course, man. I'm really excited. Number one, because you're actually one of my really good friends. Like over the last, I feel like year or two, our relationship and friendship has just been growing even more. And so I'm so grateful for that. But also just, you've had a pretty interesting journey. And you've made a lot of pivots and changes and stuff like that. But I actually want to go back right to the beginning. And I want you to tell people kind of like what you did starting out with your business and what you do now, just to give people context for where I want to take this interview.
Yeah, I mean, I left the corporate world September 30th, 2012, and I left it with the thought of, I'm going to be an online entrepreneur. I'm going to manage Facebook ads for businesses. And that was, for 15 months, that was a disaster. That was like, I got some clients, but it was really inconsistent. This is back when like no one really knew what Facebook ads were. And if you think about that, it's not that long ago. It was only 8 years ago. And, at this point, 7.5 years ago, it was almost like, all right, you know what? I'm going to give up. Between the fact that I wasn't able to get clients, I had no idea what I was doing to create my own business. I wasn't getting the results for clients that I was running ads for.
Right.
I'll never forget that first campaign that I ran that I was like, I'm a failure. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then somebody told me to create a course, and I was like, all right, I've never done this before. And so I created a course on how to do ads, $47. Had no idea. I didn't have an email list. I didn't know what a launch was or anything like that. So long story short was, for 15 months, I fumbled around. I had no idea what I was doing.
And you had left the corporate world already, right? Like you had already quit your job, and now for 15 months, you're on your own.
Yes. And that was so, I'll never forget I finished up on like a Friday or Thursday, and I'll never forget waking up that Monday morning and not going into the office, or not having to go into the office. And I was so scared. I was like, what do I do now? Like, I'm responsible. The responsibility is 100% on you. I think that's the biggest shift too, that a lot of people going from job to entrepreneur, is that there's this, like, you jump off the cliff. Like, the amount of times that I feel like I've jumped off the cliff and hoped the net has appeared has been like, I can't even keep count anymore. Yeah.
But it's like a full response. Like, and that's one of the biggest traits I think that makes entrepreneurs successful, is taking full responsibility of everything. And you're kind of thrown into it at that point.
It actually took me years to really wrap my head around, you know what? I have more security now as an entrepreneur than I did in the corporate world. And I was doing really well in the corporate world. I was making a couple hundred to a few $100,000 a year.
Wow.
I was selling online advertising.
Okay, can we talk about that for a second? So how did you get into Facebook ads in the first place? And then what made you decide to leave? Because I agree with you. Like, I feel like having control of your income and all that stuff actually brings a lot more security, because you can get fired from your job anytime. Like, you can fail from that just as easily as you can with a business. So what were you doing there? Did you gain your Facebook knowledge there? And then what forced you to actually make the jump and leave?
I wasn't doing any kind of Facebook ads in the corporate world. I'd been in the corporate world since 2000. So I started off at AOL. This is back when I'm dating myself, but this is back when like they were sending out the discs to get online, like the annoying connection sound to the internet.
Yeah. Can you replicate that for us?
I was just going to try to do it, but I was like, I stopped myself. It's like super annoying. Yep. And so I did 5 years there. And then I got laid off. This is back when, Wild West days of the internet, as I call it. And in my 5 years there were 8 layoffs. And I got hit by the 8th one. And so then it was like, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do at this point. So I literally up and moved out to the West Coast, moved to LA. And I did some personal training for a while. I was just like, I didn't want to get in. I just want to get away from the online world. And then I ended up going back to the online world, going to Yahoo for 2 years. And then, so anyway, I was in the corporate online advertising space, working with big clients, account management. Then I get into sales, which is the real fun it was really fun. And so, but in 2010, that's when I started to get the itch of like, you know what? I don't like kissing butts of, these junior agency people that don't even care one bit, that like my livelihood was dependent on them saying yes and me kissing their butts. And that's really kind of what started the whole thing. And just me thinking about, I want to just do something on my own. And so I started to see like what people were doing online and like making money online, like from their own things. And I was like, ooh, this sounds pretty cool. Just like what happens with people today. And so I hired a coach. I hired this guy who was doing it with his website, and he was traveling the country, he was writing and blogging and making money and all this other stuff. So I hired him. Never forget, $500 a month, and I think we met like once a week or something like that. And it was that one of those conversations with him where he said, "Why don't you look into Facebook advertising? Because you're an advertising guy. Why don't you look into that?" Because this is 2010, so it's starting to just, up and coming and stuff like that. Yeah. So that was really the start. I started to teach myself as much as I possibly could while I was in the corporate world, and then created a plan because I was $75,000 in debt.
Wait. You were $75,000 in debt?
Yeah.
Wow.
In 2010, and I was like, well, I'm not one, like I'm a risk taker, but I didn't want to leave the corporate world without having that debt taken care of, and B, have some sort of safety net.
Can I ask what kind of debt was that? Is that like credit card debt?
Yeah, it was credit card debt.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about you. That's amazing.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right. So it took me a little over 2.5 years to pay off the debt. And also for some reason I pulled out $100,000 as a safety net. Like I want $100,000 in the bank. I don't know where that number came from, but that's what I was able to do. And so paid off the debt, got that safety net. And then I was like, okay, I'm jumping. Yep. And I was burning through that money really quickly in those 15 months. Yeah. And I really thought I had to go back to the corporate world. Nothing against the corporate world. I just didn't want to do it. It's not what I wanted to do.
No, 100%. And that's one of the things that I say all the time is like, it's about happiness, really. Yeah. And if you are happy at a job with the security, like truly happy, like you're not waking up in the morning and just being like, oh, I wish I just didn't have to do this today. Like, then go do that. There's people on my team, like Taylor, who she doesn't want to be an entrepreneur. And she's just like, I would rather like grow something, be in the entrepreneur environment, but without any of the financial risk that comes along with it. And so, she's happy, and that's the whole thing. Okay. So you waited before the debt was paid off to actually go and start. That's probably a smart decision.
I think there's like three people that like you fall into like one of three groups, if you will, as I like to say, when you're making that decision to leave corporate. You're either gonna have a side gig where you match your day job and then you leave.
Yep.
You aren't matching it, but you have a safety net in the bank, you leave. Or you say, screw it, I'm jumping. And you're like,
that was me.
Yeah, let's find out what happens. I didn't have that kind of, I couldn't stomach that sort of thing back then.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of my story, is like, I definitely just jumped ship. I did not have any safety. I didn't have any debt, but I didn't have any savings at all. I just like, I think you know a little bit of my story, but I was just kind of like, I was just so fed up with everything. And like the business I was working at was failing, and I had like I had like $30,000 in back paychecks that were owed to me that I didn't get. And so it was just, so I was definitely
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's kind of like I guess like a story I don't talk about much, only because the company was my dad's company. And so it was just like, I just never really felt right talking about it, but here we are talking about it. You never know what's going to happen on a podcast. But anyway, so you left, you went and you started doing Facebook ads. I have two questions. So we'll start with the first one. The first one is basically, you didn't know Facebook ads, but this guy recommended you to go start Facebook ads and learn about it. So how did you start learning about it enough to like just go and do it?
Yeah, this is back when like there weren't courses like there are today. There wasn't a whole lot of articles and stuff like that. There was one woman doing it out of Australia. And I started reading her stuff, and I started just reading, just trying to consume as much as I possibly could, going into Facebook, looking at the interface, and just like trying to figure it out. Like, this stuff does come easily to me though, because it was my background. I don't mean Facebook ads are my background, but I mean like the whole concept of advertising and stuff like that. That's where people get tripped up, was like, you can learn like the art of getting ads to work for you, whether it's Facebook ads or Instagram ads or YouTube, any kind of ads. It's the art of it is really, yes, you do need to be able to pull the right triggers or the right levers, if you will, within Ads Manager and set up the campaigns the right way. But that's all that comes with, that's just learning. The other stuff is the more foundational marketing stuff, right? Who is my audience? What problem do I solve? How do I communicate to them? Right. What's the offer I'm making? All that stuff. How do I build an audience? How do I build a community? That sort of thing. That's the part that had come really easily to me, because I've been doing that for other clients and watching them and helping them do that. Right. So it just kind of came pretty natural to me.
So you just kind of jumped in there and started doing it?
Yeah, that's very much me. Once I make that decision, I'm in. I'm going to go do it.
What's interesting is that's usually the trait that most successful entrepreneurs have, and the ones that are like failing and struggling. And, why isn't this working? What am I not doing? It's like, well, you're not doing anything, or you're just doing the same wrong thing over and over and over again. So I love that about you. The second question that I had for you is like, when you finally jumped ship and you went out and you just started doing it, and you were not getting the results that you wanted for clients, how did that feel? How did you deal with that mentally? Because I think everyone who has a service at some point, you're going to run into that, where you're taking money from a client, but you're not producing the results that you thought you would be able to do. And I know I've dealt with that a lot of time, and I'm talking like with big money. And so how did you deal with that?
I stopped. I said, you know what, this isn't, I kind of dabbled a little bit after the campaigns, because they were friends of mine through the coach that I had hired. And so it wasn't working out really well. And I was just like, and so I just kind of froze, if you will. And I didn't feel comfortable continuing to do that, but I didn't stop. I didn't stop learning and trying to teach myself and stuff like that. That's when I created the course, which I think I did 2 sales of the course ever. I'll never forget the first time I did that. Everyone has that story, $47 coming through PayPal. Yep. But that's when I started a podcast. I started a podcast called Inside Social Media.
Wait, it wasn't The Art of Paid Traffic?
No, that was AOPT was my second show.
Oh, interesting.
So I've been podcasting, it's for almost 7 years, for 7 years now. Yeah. And that first one was because this is at the time where like things weren't working for me the way I thought they were. So I was like, oh, I'm too narrow. Let's broaden out and talk about social media and how big brands are using social media, but how can small businesses learn from what the big brands are doing it and do it on their budget, based on their resources. And so I had this idea. I was just like, well, I come from the corporate background, the big brands. Why not try this route? Now,
and I love that angle too.
When I say try this route, all it was a podcast. I had no offers, I wasn't selling anything. And so what I decided to do was reach out to...
By the way, hold on. For any entrepreneur listening, not selling something is a huge problem when you're trying to run a business. Just newsflash.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that part where it gets even funnier.
I think I know where it's going.
You
but
do.
Okay, keep going.
And so I was just like, all right, I'm going to start this podcast. I knew nothing about podcasting. I had met Pat Flynn, and he was like, dude, just go to my free, he still has it now, go to my free article, and that'll help you. And that's what I did.
Okay, when you say meet Pat Flynn, what do you mean?
When I was in the corporate world, I was living in LA, and San Diego was part of my territory. And so I'd come down here and call on clients and so forth. And Pat was one of the people I was following, and I just reached out to Pat. I was like, introduced myself. Hey, I love what you're doing, sort of thing, and said, hey, I'm going to be in San Diego. Would you be up for a meeting for coffee for 20 minutes?
Interesting.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And we ended up having coffee for 2 hours.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is a perfect segue into the next phase that I want to talk about. So what's really interesting, because you and Pat are great friends now, right? And I know
I literally live 90 seconds down the road from him right now.
Oh, it's amazing.
Not that I'm stalking him, but
hey, Pat, I'm your neighbor now. But you also knew Amy Porterfield at the time too, right?
So I was just going to say that's exactly the same way I met Amy. I reached out to Amy, said, hey, I'm going to be down in San Diego. I introduced myself, and she's like, who is this weirdo? and the way she tells the story is she told Hobie, her husband, look, I'm going to meet this guy who reached out. If I'm not back in, this is where I'm going to be. And so I met her at a Starbucks near her house, and the same thing happened. It was supposed to be 15, 20 minutes. We ended up talking for 2 hours, and we've been friends ever since.
And her husband's texting her after the 15-minute mark.
Exactly.
Hobie's Amy, where are you?
Are you safe? Are you okay?
Yeah. And she's like, no, I'm enjoying this guy. He's like, are you leaving me for him?
Exactly. Who is this guy?
Who is this guy? Okay, so what's really interesting is that's the exact same way I met James Wedmore, who's now one of my best friends as well. And so right around the same time, I think you and I were doing the exact same thing, exact same time. I was doing YouTube SEO and YouTube stuff for local businesses. It was kind of working, kind of not. It was just my wife was supporting us. We were living with our in-laws. I was maybe making $1,000 at best a month, off of this thing. And I reached out to James because we were both teaching YouTube. He was selling courses. I was doing it as a service. And same thing. We met for coffee. We were supposed to meet for 15 minutes, talked for 2 hours. And at the end of it, he goes, hey, if you can turn this into a business that does 10 grand a month, we can package it up into a course and sell it. But your business model is broken. Try this. And he gave me some advice on pricing that he told me later. He's like, I didn't know if that would work. But I told you to go do it so we could find out. And I told you that it would work so you would go do it. And I did it and I made it work. But what's really interesting is on the very first time after that I met James, the first time we actually met up to start mapping this thing out and creating this program, he was reading his emails, and I was sitting in the little office, and it was a part of his house at the time, a little extra bedroom thing. And he goes, man, there's this guy who keeps emailing me. And I was like, oh, okay, great. That's cool. And he's like, yeah, he wants to, he's like, I don't want to do any coaching, but he keeps emailing me. He's really relentless. He just wants me to give him a price. And he won't he just tells me he needs his help. And he's like, Amy Porterfield just told him you need James, and he's just not letting go. What do I do? I'm like, either tell him no or just do it. And I come to find out that was you.
It was me.
It was you.
I was relentless, dude.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
Lewis Howes had told me James as well.
Oh, interesting.
So people were telling me James.
How did you know? How did you meet Lewis?
I met Lewis at Social Media Marketing World way back when. And I'll never forget, I was sitting at a table with Lewis, with Amy, with Devin and Melody Duncan, with Derek Halpern, with James, and then little old me.
Yeah. How did you...
I was what am I doing here?
So for those of you who aren't on the online space, I'm assuming most of you will be, Amy Porterfield, Pat Flynn, Lewis Howes, Derek, all these people that we're talking about are probably most of them still are the top, the biggest people in the online course creation space. And back then, some of them are kind of moved on to other things, but back then they were the top dogs pretty much. Yeah. And Lewis is well-known celebrity status now. And then we have Rick.
We have me.
Well, we have. Let me rephrase it. We have baby Rick because you are now in that top spot today.
I was so scared. Like I was like, well, I didn't say a word, and then
how did you get into that table?
I don't even remember. I think it was through Amy.
Okay.
Yeah, because at that point I had been, chatting with Amy, and so she was like, you should go to this conference.
Gotcha.
And I don't remember how I continued talking to Lewis, but I remember a phone call from him. I want to say it was in August-ish of 2013. Yep. And he's like, "What are you doing?" Like he told me, he's like, the reason that you're not prioritizing the growth and like getting like of your business, of growing a business, is because you have this money in the bank and there's no urgency there. And I was like, oh yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. And so he's like, you need a coach. You need somebody who's done this. And I was like, well, what about you? And he's like, nope, I don't want to do it. Yeah. And he's like, you should talk to James Wedmore. And so that's what started. And then I was just like, all right, how do I get in touch with him? And I think I bugged him weekly because he didn't respond. Yeah. And I just like I told you, like if like once I set my sight on something, I'm relentless. I don't give up.
Yeah, he does. He did the same thing for me. When I reached out to him, he didn't respond for like a month. But come to find out, that's James.
I was just gonna say it is really no different today.
Yeah, it's still the same. It's like a 50% chance I'll get a reply when I text him.
And I will never forget the day that I remember, this is so weird. I remember the exact day that he sent me an email back saying that he'll do it. And he threw out this massive number.
Well, what's interesting about that is he told me, he was like, should I do it? And I was like, yeah, why not? And he goes, well, I don't really want to. And I said, well, then throw out some crazy number where the guy will say no.
Yeah.
He goes, okay, I'll do that.
And I surprised him and said yes. And I'll never forget, he said, he told me, because he didn't know me, he's like, I want a bank check. Like,
interesting.
Who asked that? Like, so I was driving down. I'll never forget. I was living in LA. I stopped in Newport Beach at a whatever Bank of America, whatever I was banking at, to get a bank check for this amount. And
can I ask how much that amount was?
It was $10,000.
Okay.
So right now it seems like, I mean, $10,000 is a lot, but back
pretty
then,
normal
for what he was going to be offering me. I was like, holy, and I didn't have a whole lot of money in the bank, Yeah. And so that was a big chunk, and I was just like, okay, this is either gonna work, I'm going back to corporate.
Right. Yep.
So I got the bank check, and I'll never forget, I went to that house in Laguna that you're talking about, and we met in his office, and I'll never forget, the first thing I did was hand him that check, and I was like, didn't want to let go of it. Yeah. And he had a corkboard behind him, and he pinned it to the corkboard, and so he turned around, and I'm facing him, and I can see the check over his shoulder, and I'm just staring at the check the whole time. I was like, oh my God, what have I got myself into?
Yeah, I wonder if he did that on purpose.
I'm sure he did. And so then, and one of the first things he asked me was, why aren't you making any money?
Yep.
And I was like, oh, because I'm not selling anything. Yeah. Ding, 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 ding. Yes. So,
I remember when obviously like Jimmy and I kept working on that product, and I was like, oh, how's it going with this guy, Rick? And he's like, oh man, he goes, I feel kind of bad because he paid me whatever, I forgot the amount, but you said it's $10,000. So he paid me $10,000. And basically the only thing I told him so far was that he wasn't making any money because he wasn't selling anything. And I feel bad that it was that obvious, but he just couldn't see it. And I was like, well, that to him, that's what's huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's why I think coaching and mentoring is so important, whether in masterminding and all that stuff is so important, because there's so many, like that might seem really like glaring obvious. Is that right?
Yeah.
I say glaringly obvious.
Yeah.
But to you, it wasn't. Like we all have massive blind spots, and paying $10,000 to get the blind spot exposed probably made you hundreds of thousands of dollars. But most failing entrepreneurs won't ever make that commitment. They won't ever do that because I think they can just do it on their own.
Well, once that clarity was like, oh, the light bulb went off. Yeah, I'm not selling anything. It's like, okay, what do I sell? Yeah. And so then he simply asked me the question, if you had to teach me something today, how could you help me? How could you help me make money in my business?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Facebook ads. Okay, cool. How would you do it? And I was like, boom, 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 boom. Okay, there's your course right there.
Yeah.
So like we literally mapped out the course right there. And he's like, okay, you're going to do this thing called a webinar. I'm like, I didn't know what a webinar was. And we mapped out the webinar.
Yeah.
He showed me an example of his. And I'm like, okay. So he like gave me all the pieces.
Yeah.
And in 45 days, I did a $30,000 launch.
Amazing.
Selling, I had a $497 like quote unquote base level of the course.
Yep.
And then a $997 VIP. I don't remember what that was.
Did you still have the podcast, the original podcast, or did you transition into the art of paid traffic at this point?
I didn't start AOPT until 2015. So I was still doing it.
But, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And that was the thing was like, I started to create, I don't even remember what I was giving away, but I started to create an email list even before I met James with the podcast. And that was the coolest thing after I started the podcast, even though it had nothing to do with what I really wanted to do. I mean, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point, but even though it was irrelevant to what I ended up doing, it was so cool to like get messages from people across the world, right? Like,
100%.
Oh my God, I love your podcast. And I was just like, oh, this is so cool. And this is back when I was getting, I don't know, a couple of hundred, maybe like $1,000 a month for 4 episodes. I thought it was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah. Amazing.
And that's when like really my name started to get out there, but obviously for the wrong thing. I mean, at the time,
Right.
And then, so my email list, people were like, well, yeah, you did $30,000 because you'd built up this brand. I'm like, no, I had no brand. No one knew who I was. Amy Porterfield had literally written the book on Facebook ads back then, the Facebook for Dummies with Mari Smith. And, no one, like, that was the other thing too, was because James was like, well, why aren't you doing this? And I was like, who am I to be doing it? Yeah. Who am I to be teaching this stuff? I've never,
Well, didn't you also have issues because Amy was your friend and Amy was teaching Facebook ads?
Yep.
And you didn't want to kind of compete against her, right?
And I talked to her about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a big thing where she was just like, no, totally go for it.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like, okay, cool. Let's do this and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And then I did the 30K in the first 2 months. So I looked at that as like, oh, phew, I paid back. I was able to pay back that investment. But then I learned so much in that. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I ran my own ads, of course. And I ran them straight to a webinar. This is back when we could get like, $2 webinar registrations.
Yeah. Honestly, at this Corona time, it's almost back to that right now.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had one thing I wanted to touch on real quick is that a lot of people have that like imposter syndrome. Who am I to be teaching this? Who am I to be doing it? And my response is always like, who are you to not be doing it? Like, I think most people think I have to take my audience or my people from point A to Z, and there's already someone teaching them Z. I can't do it. And it's like, no. Taking someone from A to B is enough to, as long as you know something that someone doesn't know, you can still teach it, put it into a program or something. Like there are people that teach how to go from 100,000 to a year to $1 million, right? There's going to be people that teach someone to go from 0 to 100,000 or whatever it is. There's going to be different people at different brackets. But I had a very similar conversation with James too, because we were both teaching YouTube marketing and I wanted to start selling courses and stuff. I don't know how the conversation went with Amy, but this usually happens is we create our own fears in our heads and we create like these illusions and these like scenarios that never happen. So when I had that conversation with James, he's like, I don't care. Can we talk about this product? We're like, oh, okay. Like it was nothing to him, but it was everything to me. And it was everything to me because I made it be something to me when I didn't even have to. So how did that conversation with Amy go?
I just, I mean, first of all, she was excited that I was like, starting to head in a specific direction.
Right.
And I just kind of told her like, look, like this is what I've been teaching myself for the past few years. I want to give this a try and start teaching it.
Yeah.
And she was doing ads, but it was very basic level, where she was teaching ads, but it was also a lot more like Facebook marketing in general, like building pages and audiences and how to market like that way. And because back then it was a lot different than it is now as far as building communities and stuff like that.
Right. Because her background was Harley Davidson or marketing or something like that, right?
Yeah. She had a corporate background as well.
Yeah.
And, she started off in the overall, like sort of social media consulting in general. And I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was to the point of like, yeah, go for it. At this point too, I'm sure she's thinking, well, here's this little guy over here who's going to do this. He's no threat to me.
Right.
And, and it's just, it's so funny that it's like, I know that you and I talk about this a lot, where there's some niches that, and I see this a lot in the teaching space, like the actual like teachers and stuff, like everyone's so competitive with one another. Like, oh, I don't want to share this. But whereas other niches, it's like abundance, right?
Yep.
Like, yeah, go for it.
Well, the thing is what most people don't realize is that just because someone buys someone else's course or program doesn't mean they're going to not buy the other person's.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like when James and I were developing this product, like people were buying both of our courses. We were teaching pretty similar stuff, but also different. But it's also people can read energy. They can like an instructor better than the other instructor or someone else. It has nothing to do with like one person's going to cannibalize the market. There's always going to be, and here's the other thing, there's going to be more competitors coming in. So from Amy's point of view, like, would you rather have some competitor that you don't get along with creating animosity and stuff in your life, or would you rather have your friend doing it with you? And you guys can like share each other's audience and interview each other and grow together. Yeah.
That's the other thing too, is like when you think about, well, there's the imposter syndrome and there's other people already doing what I want. Like, well, that's going to be the case with most niches out there. Somebody's doing it, which is a good thing because that means it's a viable business niche, right?
100%. Well, I also think too, like people are like, oh, my competitors. Competition is great. And I actually enjoy it because it keeps people on their toes. It keeps you developing a better product. It keeps you trying to move forward. It doesn't let you get comfortable. And so I think like even the competition is great. But if I'm going to have competition, why not just have it for my friend and we can just grow together.
And everyone, the one thing I learned early on too, and I realized early on when I was thinking about that was like, if nothing else differentiates me from what I'm teaching versus somebody else, I'm me.
Yep.
And I'm different than other people. So to your point about like energy or the way that I teach or just how I show up or whatever, like that's different. And for everybody listening, no one can take that away from you.
And that's what we talk about inside of messaging is that like inside the Video 4X in our program, one of the things is like, what are your core values? What are the identities attached to those core values? Let's lean into messaging that attracts those identities. But that's specific to you. That's going to be your audience. And Amy's going to have different core values and different audience that she's appealing to, as well. Okay, cool. So one thing I want to touch on is like it's so cool hearing this history, which is like 6 years ago or something like that. Like this history of James, because like people might be hearing us talk right now and they're like, oh, Amy Porterfield, James Wedmore, Lewis House, they're really big right now. But this is like 6 years ago when they were just getting started too. Like when I met James, I don't even think he was doing 500,000 a year yet. I don't think inside of his business, or he might have been right around that mark.
I want to say. In our first year, if it wasn't our first year, it was our second year, because I ended up coaching with him for a while.
Yep.
I don't know if it was the first year, because we started in January 2014.
I think it was the second year you guys started coaching. He hit the 7-figure mark in his business.
Because I remember he did 40-hour film school, and that was his biggest launch that he had done. Yeah. And it was like 250 grand or something like that.
Well, what's interesting too is James. Like, okay, that was 6 years ago. Let's look at 4 years beyond that. Mm-hmm. James was just a baby going through all of the same struggles that you were just talking about. Yeah. And he ended up partnering with Lewis Howes on Video Traffic Academy, which gave him the push to go develop all this stuff. Yep. And so I remember having the conversation with him, and he goes, with Local Video Academy, because it's kind of like, why? And he goes, well, Lewis gave me my start in the online space, and I want to give you the start as I want to repay the favor that he did for me to someone else, and I want to do this with you. And it was like a perfect alignment and stuff too. So it's just kind of cool hearing the history, because I think a lot of people look at where everyone is now and they're just like, oh, it was easy, or they got it, grew. And it's like, no, we all gone through
totally,
the dumps and had people help us and looked for mentors and all that stuff. And I think it's really cool to see too. And this is a good reminder for everyone listening, is that the people that are at the same level with you right now, don't look at them as competition. Look at them as like what we're talking about, because look at us now, like all of us are friends. All of us have multi-7-figure businesses now. And we are all relatively within a couple of years of each other, at the same level, kind of up and coming. And you know what's also really interesting is you had us worry about Amy competing with you, or you like feeling these you competitor with Facebook ads, and me with James with YouTube. Neither one of them even teaches that stuff anymore. Like
exactly.
And you don't. I mean, you do a little bit, but you're even transitioning out of that too. So it's like, just sell what you want to sell. Who cares? Because you're not going to sell the same thing forever. They're probably not going to sell the same forever. Just do you and grow from there. But
everyone's creating their own business, what works for them. Yeah. And so few people sell the exact same thing throughout the life of their business.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the entrepreneurial journey of like, all right, what's lighting me up right now? What do I want to expand into?
Yeah. Well, I think it's also necessary to keep the involvement going, because like James might come up with a little thing that I'm like, oh, that's cool, and then I can build off of that. So we just grow the space even more too when you kind of do that. But let's move back into your journey, because I want to get to the point. Like, okay, great, you did 30,000. I'm assuming you kept launching and started growing, and then eventually started the Art of Paid Traffic, or what did that journey kind of look like?
Yeah, so that first year we did $110,000, and I was like, this is awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wait, did you have a team at all?
I had one VA who, and this is back when I had no idea what I was doing, like as far as having people help me.
Yep.
But we did 110K, and she was part-time. But then it was crazy, because like then I quadrupled the next year. And we did 440K the second year.
Wow.
And then we doubled the next year.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And then I was like, well, hell, let's go for $1 million, because like, million's that elusive number. Yeah. And we did it. We hit it in the first 4 years. That's amazing. And so it was hockey stick growth, and that was amazing, but it also there were definitely things I would do differently as far as like the back end of the business. And it was just like sell. And there was no true foundation back end of the business and systems and processes and all that stuff. But the podcast, the Art of Paid Traffic, definitely accelerated that, because I launched it in 2015. I want to say that I launched it there was like a 5-month or 6-month gap, because I finished 2014. In the summer of 2014, I stopped Inside Social Media, but I knew I wanted to do another podcast, but I was just like, I don't know what to do it on. And I was like, oh, why don't I just start talking about Facebook ads and stuff like that? So I started the Art of Paid Traffic, and I mean, that took off. Like that was awesome, because at the time I was the only podcast for a podcast talking solely on paid traffic.
Yeah, I mean, you were like the staple, we'll get to the transition you made, but when you had it, it was like the staple podcast that you would go to for Facebook ads. Yep. I mean, it was Rick Mulready, the Art of Paid Traffic. That's it, Facebook ads for a long time.
And the podcast did really well. I mean, it continues to do really well, but like, I loved it. And it took off. I don't know what the exact number is, but you and I've talked about this too. Like, I would say easily north of 80% of all of my customers that I've had over the years listen to the podcast in some way, or have found the podcast in some way. And so that was 2015. Then, I want to say in like a year later, other, paid traffic podcasts started to come out. But that's fine. Like, that's cool. And again, I still differentiated myself through my show.
Gotcha. Okay, that's amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about the back end and the fast growth.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, there's stages to business, the whole online space. And at the time, it sounds like the business model pretty much was, I'm going to build an audience. I'm going to get listeners via a podcast, and then I'm going to sell to that audience. I'm not going to make money off of like advertisements on the podcast and stuff, but I'm going to sell my own products and my own programs to that audience, right? That was the business model at the point.
I wish it was.
Okay.
I started the podcast more so for authority and brand building. Okay. And I did let people know about, hey, I'm doing a webinar and whatever. But my model was ads to webinars. Like, that's it.
But were you running those ads to the podcast listeners, so to speak?
No, I was not. It was basically cold traffic.
Interesting.
Like, just ads. And because like that's part of, wait,
hold on. I just want to get this straight.
Yeah.
You had this massive warmed up audience that you were not selling to? For how long were you doing that for?
Not intentionally.
Okay.
Yeah. Because again, this was what, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I still didn't really know what I was doing from a podcast standpoint.
Yeah.
Other than I knew that I wanted to have this podcast and teach on this stuff. And so I just looked at it as like, oh, let's do this as authority building and brand building.
So you would say like on the webinar, hey, I'm the host of this podcast.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. And back then I was, probably top 50 on business.
Wow.
And so I could top rated business podcast and all this other stuff. And so, but then as time went on, I was like, oh, I should be, promoting my own stuff on there. And I did do that. But this was also at a time where, as happens a lot, where you get other people come to you like, whoa, why don't you do an ads course for local businesses? Why don't you do an ads course for this? And so I was like, sure, let's start doing that. And so then the podcast became, talking about ads for different things.
Yep.
And meaning, I'm going to do episodes about e-com, or I'm going to do episodes about local businesses. I'm going to do episodes about whatever. And I didn't really have any consistency there, or ad managers or what have you. And, but yeah, I was, for the first few years of the business, it was all, I built the business and built my audience and email list all off of ads.
Amazing. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the fast growth that you saw and the things that fell apart, because we're on pace to be a multi-million-dollar business this year. Yeah. Last year was our first year, or was it 2 years ago where we did $1 million? I think I don't know. We're pretty new into the million range, but we're on pace to be multi-million. And what I've realized there's literally different phases that you have to go through and kind of master before you are allowed, and not allowed. I say allowed is almost as if there's like a natural law to business that you just can't get past until you evolve through that phase.
Yeah.
The first one I think is like, I would either call it 0 to 100,000 or 0 to 250. Like, to get to 100,000 to 250 is almost the same thing. You're just doing more of the same thing.
Yep.
500 to get to the $500,000 a year, it takes a different involvement. Team starts getting involved and things like that. But you can really, in my opinion, hustle your way to $500,000 a year.
I agree.
And that's where I was at. And I was at that point where 7 days a week, 10-hour days, just like I wouldn't be able to take a vacation. I was micromanaging everything, but we're doing $500,000 a year. In order to get to the million, it took a team, like not just contractors and virtual assistants, but an actual like in-house team and systems and processes. Now we're at the million, and you can still kind of like team build and systems and stuff, but you're still like for me, I was still hustling from 500 to $1 million. To go to multi-million, it really is taking 100% like a transition from being like the person running the show to the person mentoring the people that are running the show inside of the business. And that's kind of the phase for me. So can you walk me through your phases and like what fell apart with that fast growth? What would you do differently in that kind of like journey?
People are really surprised, and I'm almost a little bit embarrassed to share what my team has looked like in the growth of the business, because I've never had a big team. Yeah. For most of my 6 years, I've had two day-to-day people. 2.
Yeah.
And then I've had contractors, obviously. You know, I have copywriting and podcasts and all that stuff.
Yep.
But generally 2 day-to-day people. And when people, the other thing too to go along with that is I have a very small email list. My email list is about 15,000 people.
15?
15.
What the heck? Is it because you like clean it out
because
a lot?
I clean it out a lot. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
But people hear that and they're like, what? Do you have a 7-figure business and you have, you know, such a small team and such a small email list? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, that is, you know, as far as the team goes, that has evolved over the years as far as what I want. I used to want the big team. I used to want the in-person office. And I had the in-person, I had lots of in-person offices, but I've never had the big team. I just decided that like I didn't want that. I'm like, I don't want that because I equate it with like a headache. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so just recently, you know, we're recording this in April of 2020, like I've brought on other people into the team. So my team has expanded because my vision has expanded, you know? And it's more of what I want at this point in the business. So what I didn't do a very good job of during the big growth years is I had no customer journey. I didn't understand the journey. All I cared about was selling, producing content, and then making sure that my customers were getting what they purchased.
What's promised, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there was no real intention behind taking somebody from not knowing me through to becoming a paying customer.
Right.
It was more like, here's a webinar. I can get you these results. Here's a course. I know this course works. Here you go.
Okay. So what were the 3 things you said? You were focusing on content creation.
Yep. I was focusing on selling, and I was focusing
making sure that the program was delivered.
Exactly. That was it.
What logistically was missing? So I get like the whole from a marketing and a storytelling and what the journey was kind of missing, like maybe the overall messaging and the brand was maybe a little off or something, but like logistically to run a 7-figure business, what was missing that you didn't have?
Well, I was missing really that the team to support me in a sense of like running with things. Essentially like, you know what? Because you mentioned like the visionary part of being the CEO and kind of stepping out of that entrepreneurial day-to-day role, which is I found is the hardest thing for people to do.
It is.
You and I talk about this a lot. I've talked with a ton of, you know, mutual friends, and it's the same thing for everyone. Going from that day-to-day, like stepping back and saying, you know what? I'm the visionary. I have the team. I'm going to work with the team to implement this vision that I have.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And so
what's hard about it for you?
I'm a control freak. Letting go of control.
Yeah.
You know, and frankly, I think that is still to a point holding me back from even further growth.
Yeah.
Of, you know, as our mutual friend Jim Fortin says, taking the hands off the wheel. Yeah. Like you gotta take the hands off the wheel in order for that baby to grow. Yeah. And I've done a better job of it. I know that I'm very aware that I can do even better job.
I think we can always do a better job. Like I thought I was doing a really good job of it until we did our last launch, which you were a part of like last month or two. And then launches can be stressful, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's good because it puts a lot of pressure on the business to see where things are broken. And I went into the launch thinking, wow, I'm doing great. Like I'm letting go of a lot of stuff. And then when we were in there and I was so stressed out during the launch, I was like, why am I so stressed? And I was like, oh, I am still suffocating the team. I'm micromanaging everyone. So as soon as that launch ended, and it's only been like a month or so, I mean, I've really, really let go. Like to the point right now where we're setting up an evergreen funnel. And I just said, Taylor, this is what I want. Go. And she's like, okay. And I just said, let me know when you need help. And she has not asked for help once, and she's presenting it to me next week. So we'll see how it goes. But it really is. And like even our agency too, you know, Matt came in maybe a year or so ago to, wait a minute. Matt, is it your work anniversary? Did we miss it? I'm an awful boss. I think I missed Matt's work anniversary.
We're talking about being a good CEO here.
I can't even hear his answer. Hold on. Did we? Oh, we did. No, never mind. We now I'm even a worse boss because we did celebrate it and I forgot. This is going horribly. But even when Matt came in, like we had a process inside of our agency, and Matt really wanted to like move things around and do things differently, and I held on to it. And I really wish I hadn't, but it took about maybe 6 months for me to finally let go. And he's been able to grow this thing into something that I would have never thought of or been able to do on my own. Yeah. So it is a huge piece, but even when you think you're letting go, there's still more stuff. It's like I feel like entrepreneurship is just a constant involvement of yourself that just doesn't end.
And that's been you and I talk about this a lot too, is like, I do take 100% responsibility for everything that goes on in the business, regardless of whether something falls apart because somebody else didn't do it or what. I still take responsibility. Yeah. Now, I wasn't very good about putting systems in place. I wasn't very good about putting processes in place. I didn't have the customer journey. The other big thing that has really annoyed my teams over the years, and I literally just had a conversation yesterday with my current team, is that I have not done a good job of future planning, meaning like 6, 9, 12 months out. Yeah. And putting a plan in place and saying, all right, because I'm more like, what are we doing this month? Yeah. And that drives the team crazy. And I have, I've kind of been challenged with anxiety since like 7th grade. Yeah. And what I've realized over the years too, is that super adds to it. But I didn't realize it until actually fairly recently. I was just like, it seems so obvious, but like you need somebody else to kind of point it out to you. Yeah. That's something that I could have done a better job of while you're going as well. Gotcha. But I reached that, you talked about the 4 phases of the group of the business, and I'm blanking on the book's title, but it's by Greg McKeown, I think. Is that right? Mm-hmm. No, Les McKeown. And he talks about the stages of a business, and I forget the first stage, but it's like, things are going really good. And then you hit like the whitewater, as he calls it. Yeah. And he says it's usually in that year 4, 5, or 6 range. And that's when I hit it. Yeah. Because that's when like,
what is the whitewater?
Well, it's when you sort of hit a point in your business where things aren't as smooth and easy, if you will, as they were when you were growing. Gotcha. You kind of lose the fun of it. Things have grown to a point where it looks very different than when you first started it. Yeah. And now it's just like, you've got more customers, you likely have a bigger team, like things are different and harder, frankly.
Well, I'm sure as the business owner, you're probably in areas of the business that you don't even want to be in anyways. So like the thing that was fun for you when you started the business is no longer the thing on your plate anymore because you have all this other crap to deal with.
Exactly. And so he says like, you either give up, like you're like, I'm going to go start something new again so I can go back to that fun stage. Yeah. Or you work through it and then, you try to fix it and you stay in the whitewater and you're not able to fix it. But then he says the really successful businesses are the ones that address what's going on in the whitewater phase and then you move through it.
Gotcha.
And so I think that's what I did in 2018 and 2019, frankly, last year as well.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of interesting because, my story, but like, I think it was the end of 2017. We just finished 500,000 that year. It was like 490 or something. So like right at 500. But I'm realizing now, but I was in that whitewater phase. Like I was just hating everything I was doing. And I did exactly what you just said. I just stopped. I'm like, no, I'm done. Yeah. That's it. Like I'm moving on to something else. And for 3 months, I was just trying to figure out what that's going to be. And I did exactly that. I didn't like push through or try to fix it or whatever. I basically just started over. Yeah. So, okay. So walk me through where you're at now. So like, or the transition you're in now. So for the longest time, you were teaching Facebook ads. You're doing a couple different courses, like one for local businesses, one for different types. You have the Art of Paid Traffic podcast. And then I remember if I remember correctly, it was almost like a year. I remember you starting to bring up these conversations and have talks about like wanting to expand beyond just Facebook ads and wanting to build a team. And you're talking for about a year, we had this conversation, and then you finally did it. And this is what I would call a pivot. So I just want to be very clear about something for everyone that's listening. There's a lot, because we're in the, like, if you're listening in the future, we're in April, like right in the middle of the COVID thing. We're still in quarantine. We're still like locked in, and everyone and their mom is talking about pivoting. And I'm just like, no, we don't really need to pivot. Like, a pivot is changing your offering, changing your business direction, where I think a lot of people right now just maybe need to change their messaging, but you did a full on pivot. So can you explain, like, why did you stop the Art of the Paid Traffic podcast? Why, and where are you going now?
So people think I stopped AOPT. All I did was I renamed it.
Yeah.
That's all I did.
Right.
I basically rebranded the show because in, I would say, the early part of 2019, I just got tired of just teaching ads. Yeah. Like, I love ads. Like, but I've been doing it for 10 years now, and I can teach it to anybody. And it just was like, it just got boring to me, frankly.
Yeah.
And when someone came to me and was talking about things like offers or launches or mindset, like is my jam. Like, now we're talking. I felt myself. I felt the energy shift when I got to talk about those types of things, or building a team, because I'd been through so many iterations, and like, I'm spending too much time and I don't know what to do. Like, those types of conversations, those were lighting me up. And so what I started to realize was, like, you know what? And I knew it all along, but it took me a while to get there. It's like, ads are just one piece of the puzzle in growing a business. There's so many other things there. And so I wanted to continue talking about ads, but I also wanted to start talking about all the other stuff.
Right.
And also teaching the other stuff.
Right.
So I had my ad courses, and so then I started group coaching programs, like higher end group coaching programs. And what I was finding was that people were coming into the group coaching programs for ads, but that, like, we were spending maybe 10% of the overall time on ads, and everything else was like on other stuff.
That's the thing with ads, is people don't understand. It's like, the ads are just one element, but if your offer sucks, your funnel sucks, you don't have the right mindset on how to spend money on ads. Like, your ads aren't going to work.
Yeah. Imposters and like all that stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's really what, and I was at a crossroads in early 2019. I was just like, I wasn't sure what to do with it. And it was people in my group coaching program at that time, they were like, so wait a minute, you're not going to continue this, but you love doing this. You're really good at it. You've helped all of us take our business to the next level. And like, we don't understand, Yeah. And so there was a lot of things that I wasn't saying to them at this point, because there was a lot of fear and all this other stuff that I wasn't sharing, because I thought that I couldn't, because I'm known as the ads guy. Yeah. But I was afraid of losing that identity, basically. Right. And that people wouldn't see me as somebody else who could help them, or as somebody who could help them beyond ads. Right. When in fact, like, I'd built a 7-figure business in 4 years, and so there's a lot that goes into that, and I've learned a ton. So I really kind of had to get through that. So what I decided to do was I started to sprinkle in topics on the Art of Paid Traffic that were not just ads related, like mindset or launching or what have you. Right. And so I was just like, well, I'm going to kind of see the feedback that I get from people and take it from there. And I started getting, like, my numbers didn't drop, my downloads, I mean. The feedback was great. And so I was like, cool, I'm going to continue this. And so I continued it for a good 8 months.
But still under the name of Art of Paid Traffic.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And then I decided to, you know what, let's make the change to the Art of Online Business. And the reason I did that was because, and that's why I say it wasn't like a new podcast. I continued the exact, like, it was all the other episodes, like everything was the same. Yeah. Just the name changed. But it was a rebrand from the perspective of, I'm not just talking about ads, and I explained that to people. And I also got really specific too about this is for online experts, meaning you're a course creator, like the audience that you speak to.
Yep.
This is like if you're e-commerce, if you're an ads manager, it's not specifically for you. It's going to be very helpful for you, but I'm not speaking directly to you per se.
Yeah.
That was another thing I'd come full circle on, because when I started in January 2014, that's who I was speaking to. But then I started adding in ad managers and local businesses, and I was all over the place.
Yeah. It gets too scattered.
Yeah. And so then it was like, all right, allow me to come kind of full circle, because this is what I've done. And so it's been a rebrand, and I'm literally my new website's coming out with the next 3-4 weeks or so.
That's awesome.
With all new, you and I are talking about messaging and all that stuff, but it's been and also what I'm doing now as far as the pivot goes is I'm going to be creating smaller courses for that journey that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So when someone's in that, they're either making no money up to say, $1,000 a month, what does that look like? What do they need to get to the next level? And I'm serving, again, from an online expert perspective, serving them from the ads perspective through the journey up to my accelerator program, which is high level coaching, mastermind kind of thing.
Gotcha. So what's really interesting, one thing I want to talk about is a lot of people will grow their business and they think like, oh, the way to scale this out or grow this is to another course, a different avatar, a different whatever. And it sounds like
that's what I thought too.
Yeah. And you went that route. But what ends up happening, and I think you experienced this, is your messaging gets so scattered that you're speaking to no one. And so it sounds like you've kind of readjusted and fine-tuned into who specifically you're talking about, how specifically you're going to serve them, and you're just going to stay in that field, right?
Yep. And it got so, I'll never forget, I was in James's mastermind at the time. We were in a retreat in New York. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget sitting in our room. I got up in front of the room and I was like, guys, I need to simplify this business. I have a course for this. I have a course for that. I have a course for this audience. I have a membership over here. I have a group coaching program. I was just like, I had like 6 things going and I was so overwhelmed. I couldn't have one conversation. I mean, just ad managers in and of themselves, I looked at it as like 3 different types of people within ad managers.
Yeah.
So it was like, I mean, and you and I talk about this all the time as far as like one message, speaking to one audience, not one message per se, but like speaking to one audience, I was exhausted.
Yeah.
But I thought that I couldn't scale the business by simplifying down.
Right. Yeah.
And right as it is right now, I have a 7-figure business with 2 offers.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's the same thing with us.
Yeah.
And like that's a pivot we made. I was selling like YouTube stuff over here, local video. I was selling some, and like I was incorporating services into that. And then when we made our shift, so we went from that pivot of like $500,000 a year to now nothing. I put myself $40,000 into credit card debt. We started the Video 4X. This is almost 2 years ago, but it was one thing. We sold our Video 4X methodology around messaging and content, and we sold on 3 levels. And as soon as we focused on one thing, we scaled it out, because now you're putting 100% of your effort into one thing versus 20% effort into like 5 things. And, there's other things too. It's like, not only is your messaging more dialed in, but also you confuse your audience if you have too many different things. Oh, I bought this. Do I need this? Why do I need this if I bought this already? It's just a big mess that people don't understand.
And that's part of like the whole messiness that I created.
Yeah.
I just thought real quick, kind of going back to those early years, I do think that there does have a place of, can you do any kind of one-to-one work early on, just like you were doing, to kind of help build your credibility, your skills, all that stuff. And so I was doing that those first couple of years, where I got to run ads for some quote unquote big names. I got connected with Marie Forleo and Gabby Bernstein. I ran Tim Ferriss's. I don't know if you know that. I ran Tim Ferriss's ads for like 6 months.
Wow.
But that was, I just ended up not wanting to do it after a short, but it was great experience though. And it just led to it helped me in my course creation and being able to develop the system that I was teaching.
That is so important. I think so many people get into this space thinking, I'm going to start a course. It's going to be great because I just like make a sale. I don't have any fulfillment. I don't have, it's like, there's a ton of fulfillment on a course. Like if you really want it to be a great experience for people, there's stuff on the back end, there's calls, there's support. You got to build a team around it, all that stuff. But the one thing you just touched on that I think is very important is that you did the service, and these are your words. I might miss it a little bit. You said it, that gave me the experience to develop the course. And what I think so many people do is they get so wrapped up in creating a course. They actually lose the experience of running and knowing, because I'm a huge on knowing. There's a difference between knowledge and knowing means that you've actually done it. Like you don't learn to ride a bike by reading a book. You learn it by doing it. And so what you were doing by the service, and this is why I love the agency so much, even though it's been a hard road with the agency, and it's expensive and it takes a lot of work, but it gives us the knowing of how to maneuver things inside of our course. And that's why I believe that we understand our messaging so well. We understand our course is as good as it is. Our program is as good as why we're talking about things that people just aren't talking about is because we have millions of views, thousands of ads, hundreds of scripts being written inside of our agency that gives us this deep level of knowing to develop the best program out there. And it sounds like you did the same thing. Like you were doing it as a service, even though you hated it, it still gave you that experience to develop an amazing course.
You get to test stuff with other people's budget.
Yeah. There you go.
And I don't mean that in like a scammy kind of way. It's just like, like, look, I want to test this, or I learned this. I want to see how it works. And you have a client that you're working with. Oh, let's check it out.
Yeah.
Let's see if it works. And you don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying like you're ripping off your client. It's just,
of course not.
It's the learning process.
Yeah.
And it also led me to understand that, I mean, even to this day, I get asked all the time, will you run my ads? Will you run my ads? And I just I haven't done that in years. I have students who do that.
Yeah.
But like, it led me to like, I enjoyed it for a while, but then I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this. I want to just continue with my courses and allow this knowledge that I gleaned from this experience into my courses.
I love it. I love it so much. And how's the pivot going? Enjoying it?
I am. I like it so much better. Yeah. And I'm still, you know, as you and I talk about a lot, mindset is huge for me. I'm always working on mindset. It's a constant education for myself and working on that. But I just love being able to help people grow their business beyond just ads. And like, I do think that that's one thing that makes me unique, is that I can teach them ads. I can help them with their ads, but also all the other aspects of the business as well.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun for me. And so I do think that we're just getting started, even though, you know, the rebrand's been going on for the past 6 months or so.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing is you're focusing and leaning in on what lights you up. And that's something too, is like we grew really fast when we made our pivot. And for the first year we did really well. And then like the second half of the next year, like we kind of plateaued. I was talking about things that I wasn't happy about. So even in our pivot, I still had to like lean into what actually lit me up, what I really enjoyed. And then we started taking off again. I believe to my core, that's what alignment is. Like people talk about, oh, you're not aligned. It's like, well, how do I get aligned? It's like, just only do the things that you enjoy doing inside of the business. For me, that's content creation, talking about the things that I want to talk about, doing this podcast. That's the stuff. And that's now we're seeing like massive growth again.
And just for the first time in a few years, I'm creating new courses this year, which I'm really excited about. Like I'm creating a version of my ads course for teachers who sell, or people who sell on Teachers Pay Teachers, which I'm really excited about that, because I've attracted those types of entrepreneurs into my mastermind and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And like there's such a need for it. And like I'm super jazzed about it, because it's like I'm starting from scratch. Like I'm literally right now building the lead magnet. We're getting our ads ready to, like, we're starting from scratch to build a brand new audience. And so it's fun for me to kind of start over with this arm of the business. But I feel like I had to go through all the other stuff to kind of get to the point where like, all right, I only want to do what lights me up.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, who knows what I feel like this could be a huge part of the business.
It will.
And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. Rick, we've been chatting away for over an hour already. Went by really fast. So I'm going to ask you just some fire rapid questions.
Let's do it.
I actually want to have you back on a part 2 because I took some notes and there's things that I want to talk to you about.
Totally, dude.
So we'll do a part 2, but you ready for rapid fire? I'm looking for just quick.
We're going to do part 4, 5, and 6 as well.
I'm just going to sit here all day and just chat.
Fire away.
Okay, cool. What do you think the future of entrepreneurship is going to look like?
I think it's going to. I think it's going to evolve even more quickly than it really has. I think we're faced with so many changing things in the world, and that there's so many cool things for problems to be solving. I think it's the people that are willing to, like we talked about earlier, who are willing to dive in and figure something out, and not just want what is being sort of perceived as the entrepreneurial world and the entrepreneurial life. Yeah. I think more people are going to really be diving into that, because I think corporate world, I mean, it's not going away. More and more people are going to be creating their own stuff.
Yeah.
And diving in and serving other people.
I believe that to my core, and there's in ways that we're not even aware of yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. What has been your biggest struggle growing your business?
I think being a good leader, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And like I'm my own. You and I talk about this a lot. I'm my harshest critic in that realm. But I think like just because for so long I've been in growth.
Yeah.
That I've not taken the time to. It's just like you said. I forget for what example, but like you can read leadership books and all that stuff, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
And get it. So I feel like I can do. And I've made a lot of improvements there. I think that's been the biggest area in the past of improvement for me.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Well, I forget who it was, but someone told me at some point, it's like, well, the fact that you're even asking this question about how to be a better leader already shows that you're a great leader.
Yeah. And you told me that too. And I was like, oh, it's a brilliant question. And I'm like, oh, I feel better about myself.
Yeah. Love that. Last question is, what do you think has been the one thing that has brought you the most success?
Connections, hands down.
Just
the people that I've met. Like I hear from a lot of people, they're like, "Oh my God, you know so many people."
Yeah.
And it's just just over the years, like being a good person and trying to add value to people where you can, going to events, asking people like, "Hey, who can you introduce me to?" That sort of thing, and that just snowballs. And people like, I'm putting an event on as part of the bonus package for Video 4X later this year. And you, Jim Fortin, Amy Porterfield, Pat Flynn, Mel Abraham, and myself, and people are like, oh my God, how do you get all those people? I'm like, they're just friends of mine, and I think that's been hands down, the biggest, integral part of growing the business is just building and I don't look at it as a network. I just look at it as like friends of mine and people 100%. I know and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I was, when I grew my business, I hated networking. I'm like, I don't need anyone. I can do this on my own. And then I look at now how many connections I have and how well connected I am in this space. And like, we'll do a launch. We'll have you as an affiliate. Yeah. It wasn't even it's like, hey, do you want to promote this? You're like, yeah. And we both, changed a lot of lives through the process and brought in a lot of revenue from it. But that wouldn't have happened if had the connection not been, or the friendship not been there. Yep. I agree with you 100%. That's something that I think is so undervalued, especially with new entrepreneurs, is they don't focus on the connection part. And you focus with people that are at the same level as you. You guys grow together, and it just expands and grows on each other. So
I think people too have the wrong. They take the wrong angle in trying to do that.
It's about what can I get?
Exactly. Yeah. Where it's like, look, because or they reach out and say, how can I help you? I'm like, I don't know. I'm super busy. Like, you tell me. Like, do your homework or whatever. Or if you're reaching out to somebody that you want to connect with, like, do your homework. How can you add value to them? How can you serve their audience and lead with that?
Well, that alone
is going to make you stand out.
Well, what's going to happen now is you talked about meeting
I was
Amy.
just gonna say.
You talked about meeting Amy with coffee. I talked about meeting James with coffee and just reaching out. We're going to have 100,000 emails from people wanting to have coffee and offering to add value into your life.
Guys, Brandon has Thursdays and Fridays wide open.
I guess
he's open for coffees with people, so definitely reach out to him.
In the show notes, guys, we'll have Rick's phone number and personal email for you.
His address.
Yeah, his new address.
Yeah.
Awesome. Rick, I appreciate you so much, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to be here with us.
Absolutely.
Conversation went by really fast.
It did.
And so I think we definitely need to have you back on. But where can people find out more information about you?
I think the best place to start is the podcast, The Art of Online Business. All podcast platforms, the show's there. I'm at Rick Mulready on Instagram, and my website is rickmulready.com.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks again, Rick.
Brother.
Appreciate it, bud.
Appreciate you, man.